Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Mike Crispino. My pronouns are he, him. I'm on the WWF Oceans team. I'm joining you from traditional Anacostan and Piscataway lands, also known as Silver Spring, just outside of Washington, D.C. It's really important to acknowledge the indigenous and the native peoples who have stewarded the land and waters around us for millennia. We have a lot to learn from their knowledge and their continued struggles, and so just want to acknowledge that right off the top. Also, want to acknowledge that we're coming to you with heavy hearts here in the WWF family today. We got some tragic news that just yesterday, five of our colleagues and friends died in a car accident in Pakistan. So we are mourning the loss with our colleagues at WWF Pakistan. We are thinking about them and their friends and families, as well as the colleagues that we've lost. We are sending our deepest condolences and our thoughts as well. We have come to know, unfortunately, at WWF loss, and we've come to know that one of the ways that we can honor our colleagues is to celebrate the leaders who are coming up behind them. And so it is with that that I do want to welcome you to what is an annual event and celebration of achievements by outstanding young conservation leaders. And I'm very excited to introduce the 2021 recipient of the WWF US Conservation Leadership Award, Jasmin Graham. Jasmine, thank you so much for joining us and congratulations.
Thank you. So, hi everyone. My name is Jasmin Graham. My pronouns are she, her. And I'm joining you from Sarasota, Florida, which is the ancestral land of the Seminole tribe of Florida. And I also want to acknowledge the Lost Nation of the Toccoba people, who were excellent stewards of the Tampa Bay estuary, where I conduct my research, before unfortunately falling victim to the effects of colonialism.
Jasmine, I am very excited. I'm also very humbled and honored to speak with you today. So thank you so much for joining us. One of the reasons why I'm honored and humbled is because Jasmine, as a shark scientist, focused, I knew I was going to do this, focused on the small tooth sawfish currently. I knew I'd have to say it slowly because, my tongue would get tied as it just did. But she's also the president and CEO of Minorities in Shark Sciences, an educator. And today, again, I have my student hat on, so I'm excited to learn. And Jasmine, one of the things that I want to get to you in a second is more about what it is to be a shark scientist. But first, I want to make sure that everybody watching at home knows that they can put their questions for you in the chat, and we'll get to those a little bit later on. But yeah, that first question, because it sounds like possibly one of the coolest jobs on earth. What is it to be a shark scientist? And are you diving a lot? Are you traveling a lot? Are you up close with sharks a lot? What's it like?
So the beautiful thing about shark science, or really any science, is it is what you make it. So I call myself a shark scientist because that's mostly what I study is sharks and their relatives. So shark skates and rays, also known as elasmobranchs. And I specifically study their movements. So I go out, I fish for them, I tag them, I release them, I take a bunch of samples, genetics, muscle tissue to do stable isotopes to figure out what they're eating, all sorts of things like that. Sometimes we do blood so we can look at their physiology and hormones and determine where they are in their breeding cycle and everything like that. But there are so many people out there that study sharks in so many different ways. There are people that do it by diving. There are people that do it like I do it by fishing. There are people that study people that are fishing for sharks. So, more on the social scientist side. There are people that are kind of mixing medicine and shark science together, and they are looking at the amazing healing capabilities of sharks and if that can be applied and isolated to help humans. And so there are so many different ways that people study sharks. My way is just one way, but that's one of the things that I love about science is you can just pick something that you're really interested in and just ask a bunch of questions and try and figure out the answers, and you'll never be out of a job because there's always questions.
Always questions. Why? So first of all, clarify um, is the sawtooth, is it a shark? But also, why save them in the context of, the oceans and conservation and the list that is extremely long of things that we need to prioritize when it comes to the health of our planet? Why is this an area that you believe is important to focus on?
So the small-toothed sawfish is a ray. People often think it's a shark. It does look very sharky. It has the two dorsal fins. It has a tail that looks very sharky. It swims kind of sharky with its tail more so than with its pectoral fins, like flying like we typically think of a ray. But they are in fact rays, and one way that you can tell that is because their gill slits are on the bottom. So, fun fact: if you look at an animal and it's made of cartilage and its gill slits are on the side, shark. If its gill slits are on the bottom, ray. So that's kind of how you tell. The reason why small-toothed sawfish fascinates me is they're such unique animals. They have this long nose, which we call a rostrum. That's the saw that makes them have their name. And so they use this to hunt and defend themselves. It's a very interesting and unique body plan. And whenever we see animals that have evolved to have some very specific way of looking, more often than not, there is a reason for that. There is something that they needed that adaptation to make them better able to do what they do and fulfill that role in the ecosystem that they fulfill. And so the fact that there aren't a lot of sharks and rays that have that body plan with the long nose and the teeth coming off of it, that to me indicates that there's something that is special about them. There's some reason why they have this adaptation, and we don't yet maybe understand all of the details, but it would be a shame to figure out how important they are when they're gone. And so that's why I'm super passionate about it. And we've also seen really great strides being made in the protection of sawfish. In the US, we have been working on this for a while. People have been working on this since before I started working on it. It's been listed on the Endangered Species Act. And since then, we have seen the population stabilize, which shows us that with work and putting things in place, we can probably do that same thing for sawfish in other countries as well. And so it is, one, very important because they're critically endangered and they're at the brink. But two, it's very important because we have evidence that it can be turned around. And so I think that we should always go for species that are likely to be able to be saved. And so that's why I like to focus on the small-toothed sawfish.
All right. I didn't ask ahead of time, and I really think that it's probably true, but I hope that this is recorded because the amount of knowledge you packed into like 3 minutes there about also how to distinguish between sharks and that was fascinating, and I learned a lot. And I have some amazing scientists on my team as well who teach me a lot, but this is great. So when it comes to saving species, though, it does take a certain amount of public and political will. And for that, you need advocacy. That's something that you have done in addition to research. And I know that science and advocacy, there's an intersection now that's really being explored. Um, so I guess a little bit about how you see yourself as a scientist and an advocate, but then also what's missing from that space, what's missing from that dialogue right now that must be a part of it if the advocacy really is going to, benefit and have outcomes both for the species, but then also the communities who are so closely connected to and identified with these species.
Yeah, so I like to tell people that I kind of live at an intersection of several different things. So sometimes when I do presentations, I have this little Venn diagram thing where it's like three circles, and I'm like, you are here in the middle of those three circles. And those three circles are diversity, equity, inclusion, or social justice. They go kind of hand in hand. Science research, and then science research slash conservation, and then education. So I think that all three of those parts are really important because it's great to do the science. It's great to have all this information. But if it doesn't get transferred to the next generation or it doesn't get transferred to the policymakers or the general public so they can put pressure on the policymakers, it's not going to be as effective. If we all just keep it in this little ivory tower where only some people have access to it, then we're not going to be able to move the needle as fast as we need to. And I also think that having that social justice or that diversity, equity, and inclusion component is super important because we all share the same planet, all of us. Whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you live in the global south, whether you are black, whether you are white, whether you are Asian, we're all sharing the same planet. And if only certain people from certain countries, certain demographics, certain socioeconomic backgrounds are part of the conversation, then we're not getting the whole picture. And so I'm really strongly focused on making sure that everyone is included because we all need to solve the problems together. And if we only solve the problems for a part of the population of the world, we still have a problem. And I think it's really important, especially when you start thinking about things that impact certain communities more than others. So we're talking about sea level rise. Well, sea level rise is going to affect coastal communities, specifically poorer coastal communities that don't have the ability to move. And so they should be part of the conversation because they're going to be impacted the most. Fishers that rely on the seafood that they get from the ocean should be part of the conversation. We shouldn't be demonizing or blaming people or pointing fingers. We should all be working together because if we do that, if everyone's a part of coming up with the solution and everyone's on the same page, then you don't have to deal as much with, oh, we're having trouble enforcing this, or like this country's not playing along. Well, was that country involved in the decision or did you make the decision for them? Because nobody wants to be told what to do, particularly by people that are outside and don't know what their lives are like or their situations. And so that's why I think all three of those pieces are really important.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. Yeah. And again, why I'm so very excited that you're the recipient of this award and also here with us because it's a really important point to get across. We're going to go to some of the questions we're getting from the people that are watching us and following along. And this one, I believe, is a really good question because I want to know this too. At the root of it, what inspired you to focus on sharks and rays? When you sat down, like you said, a lot of ways that you can go. What inspired you about sharks and rays?
I'm most interested in this group of animals because they're so misunderstood and often misinterpreted. There's all sorts of like negative stereotypes or perceptions around them, and I've always been one that roots for the underdog. You probably could tell that by my soapbox speech that I just gave a couple seconds ago. But I'm all about like lifting up the unheard or letting people know, hey, you think this, but that's not the whole picture. That's not the whole story. And so that's why I'm really interested in sharks in particular, because it's really important to be thinking about not only the animals that are cute and cuddly and that have like really cute Disney movies made after them, but also all of these animals that are being demonized, that people are saying things like the only good shark is a dead shark, or people that are purposefully going out and hunting them down because they feel like they're evil killing machines or something like that. And so that's why I'm really interested in working with these animals because they've been around for so long. They've been on this planet for like 600 million years. They're older than trees, and they deserve to continue living. And who are we that have been here in the blink of an eye to decide that this group of animals doesn't deserve to exist? So that's why I'm interested in sharks and rays.
Right on. And so I think that's a good segue then to the minorities and shark sciences, and a little bit about the inspiration for that, how that came about, And yeah, I'm interested to learn about this because I follow y'all on Twitter and I have been for a little while, and I'm just interested to know more about what inspired that and yeah, your story there.
So me and the other co-founders, Carly Jackson, Amani Weber Schultz, and Jada Elcock, we met on Twitter during the Black Birders Week. And there was this hashtag Black in Nature, and we were sharing pictures of ourselves in nature, which for me, most of my pictures are me doing field work. And so I had shared a picture, and then I was scrolling through the hashtag, and I saw that Carly had shared a picture of her doing shark research. And I replied, "Oh my goodness, there's another Black woman in shark science." And it was so exciting. And then next thing you know, it was like, me two, me three, me four. And there's like this whole group of people that I didn't know existed because I had been kind of living my life like, oh, well, this sucks. I feel like I'm the only one doing this. And then come to find out there are others. And so I always tell people that it's kind of like when you're in a desert and you don't know how thirsty you are until you have that first drink of water. That's what it felt like of like, wow, I didn't know how much weight I had been carrying. I didn't know how alone I had been feeling until I met someone else. And we started talking and we all kind of had the same feeling. And we immediately were like, well, there's probably so many others out there that are feeling like this too. And they don't think that they have a community, so we should start an organization to show people that they're not alone. And so we opened it up and we started saying like, hey, if you're a woman of color and you're interested in shark research or conservation, like come join our community. And we weren't expecting the outpouring of so many people. At this point, we have 370 members, 35 different countries represented, every continent except for Antarctica. We're working on it. And so I had no idea how many people there were out there. And then with all of that, we also got people emailing us and saying like, hey, I wanted to be a shark scientist when I was in college, and I ended up leaving the field because I felt so alone, and I experienced these barriers that y'all are trying to break down. And I want you to know that if this would have existed when I was starting my career, I would be a shark scientist. And so knowing that we're having that much impact and getting to hear from parents who have little girls that are saying like, oh, I want to be a shark scientist, and or like that person looks like me, they have hair like me, they're doing this, I want to do that. And that's kind of what it's all about, is breaking down those barriers, supporting people, and then just kind of raising our collective voices to say, hey, we're being excluded from this field. There are a lot of things that we're experiencing and it's not okay. And you can't ignore all of us. You can maybe ignore one person. You can't ignore 370. So, yeah.
So, a follow-up question to that then, for somebody like myself, how can I be the best ally for that community, right? In there, as you said, even though you've found community, it is still relatively small as far as representation. If you look at, all sort of aspects and demographics of sciences writ large, but how can I be an ally in a position where I sit to ensure that that space is created? And what is a role for someone like me to play in that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And we all can play a part in this. So, even if you're not a scientist, even if you don't work for a conservation organization, if there's someone around you that expresses interest, encouraging that interest. So many times, little girls hear, don't do that, don't get dirty, little girls don't do that, or I'm going to get you this. Even though you asked for a toy dinosaur, I'm going to get you a Barbie because I think that's what little girls want. If someone in your life expresses interest, you should support that. You should avoid saying things like, "Oh, that's not for girls" or something like that. If you are in the field of science or conservation and you have the ability, highlighting and amplifying the work of people who aren't usually heard, giving funding and support to people that don't usually get it, and making sure that within your organization that you're mitigating as much bias as possible in the process. Like if there are so many hoops that someone has to jump through to get your internship or to get this funding, you're losing a lot of people. You're losing everyone that doesn't have someone to walk them through that process. You're losing everyone that maybe is first generation and doesn't know how to apply for things. And the more steps you add, the more likely it is that they're going to give up, and they're going to feel like it's not for them. So that's what I would say. And then also, if you're going through and you notice someone saying something or doing something, or someone feeling hurt by something that's going on, speaking up and saying something and reaching out to them and making sure that they're okay and believing them whenever they come and tell you that something happened. It's really easy to want to say, oh, that kind of thing doesn't happen here, or like that person wouldn't say that. But if someone is telling you that someone hurt them, you should believe them, and you shouldn't make them have to prove that, because that's painful. Because one, you experienced the thing, and then two, nobody believed you. That doesn't feel good. So those are the things that I would say are really good ways to be an ally.
All right, really appreciate that. Thank you. I'm going to go to the chat now for another question because I think this is a good question at this time too. Do you have any advice for someone who wants to get into the field, and how can a younger aspiring shark scientist prepare to be successful in the future? Really good question.
Yeah, I think my advice would be to try and learn as much as possible. And there are lots of ways you can learn. You can watch documentaries and movies, you can go to the library, you can read books, you can watch things like this. They're happening all the time, especially after the pandemic started, everyone went virtually. So now there's like loads of things available online. So if you can get yourself to a computer and the internet, might I suggest a public library, hashtag love libraries, then you can access these sorts of things. So that's where I would start. And then once you kind of get to the point where you're getting ready to apply for college, I would talk to people, talk to guidance counselors, try and figure out what a good school for you would be. It doesn't really matter the name or anything like that. I know people like to focus on names, but it should be the best school for you where you're going to get what you need. And so you know that it's a place that you're going to be comfortable and you're going to thrive. And then just kind of reaching out to people. Don't be afraid to reach out to people. I get people email me randomly all the time, and I appreciate them. It'll be someone that'll be like, hi, you don't know me, but I want to ask you a question. And if I have the time, I will answer and I will, try and help. And there are lots of people out there that are working in this field that will do that. So ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. No one is expecting you to know how to do everything and know all the steps, because we all had to get help. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to go to your professors and say, I'm really interested in this thing, but I don't know where to start. Going to office hours and just trying to meet people, working in labs, trying to get internships, things like that. And definitely don't feel like you have to do things for free, because that is a whole systemic thing that we're trying to change with MIST. So if you're like, oh, I have to work, or I have to support my family, or I have to do this, don't let that stop you from doing an internship, because there are paid internships out there. And if there is an organization and they're not willing to pay you, they don't understand your value. So go find something else to do. That would be my advice.
Good advice. Very sound. And let's go from maybe somebody who is, looking to their future professional career to a 7-year-old. Somebody wrote in that their 7-year-old loves mangroves, but they don't live near any. And he also loves sharks too, they assure us. So they're just wondering what sort of resources you'd recommend to continue to grow his passion in that area when he doesn't live around them. And I feel, whomever this 7-year-old is, I definitely feel his pain, because I love mangroves and I live in Silver Spring and there are no mangroves here either.
Yeah, mangroves are really good. Favorite thing. Sawfish use mangroves whenever they are babies. Some sawfish also love mangroves. So I would say trying to find, like I said, documentaries, books. There are other ways to experience these things. So really like trying to find things, even if it's something where mangroves are just kind of like the background and it's not like about mangroves. It can be really exciting to watch like a nature documentary that takes place in the mangroves and you get to see the mangroves and everything. Yeah, I would say researching, connecting them with people, maybe someone that studies mangroves, and just reaching out and saying, hey, my kid loves mangroves. You want to talk about some mangroves? That would be something that would be really cool. And then that way they get to enjoy the mangroves even though they don't live near any.
All right. We are coming up on the bottom of the hour, which I knew was going to happen, and we're not going to get to all of the questions, but I do want to ask one more thing, and that is specifically on small-tooth sawfish. What is next in your efforts around that? And are there ways that the people who are watching this can help you or just help the larger effort?
Yeah, so I'm going to be starting up my field work again in February. And so the plan is to try and tag some sawfish. We had some sawfish reports in the Tampa Bay estuary in February, which was a little odd because it's a little chilly. But where they were found was actually the affluent from a power plant. And so we think that the waters are warmer there, and that's why they're hanging out right there. And so we are going to fish that spot, see if there is a contingency of sawfish that's like still hanging around in Tampa Bay in these like warm pockets, while the others are going south to migrate. And then also in the spring, we're going to be walking the beaches because we had some newborn sawfish that were born on the beaches of Tampa Bay, which was pretty wild. People were seeing them like all over the beach in like ankle deep water. And so we're like, what's up with that? Are we going to have more this year? And so we're going to be walking the beach to see if there's more baby sawfish this year. And in terms of how people watching can get involved, if you find yourself in Florida for any reason, or really anywhere, you might maybe come across a sawfish in Georgia or Mississippi, because there is evidence that they are there sometimes. So if you do see one, you can call and report it to us. And there are several ways you can report. You can go to sawfishrecovery.org and report online, or you can call 1-844-4-SAWFISH to report on our hotline. And that's really helpful to us because, like I said, we don't know that there are baby sawfish on the beach unless somebody calls it in. And we don't know that there are sawfish in February in Tampa Bay unless someone calls it in. And so that stuff really helps us to be able to locate them. It helps us know where they're spending a lot of time. And if we know where they're spending a lot of time, we can delegate resources to protecting those areas and making sure that when the sawfish are there at that time, that there's not any other threats that might hurt them while they're there. So yeah, report, see something, say something, stealing that motto, but yeah.
No, but that citizen science, I think, is it's key to getting people like engaged in the issue, but also making them, they have something to do, and that information is so helpful to scientists too. So I'm really very thankful that you were able to join us. I thank everybody else who is able to join us. Congratulations again, Jasmine. If you are looking to learn more about Jasmine and her work, we'll be sharing it on WWF channels over in the coming months. We really look forward to it. And wherever you are, I hope you have a great rest of the day. And thanks so much for joining us. And thank you, Jasmine. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.